Hello and welcome back to the Eurotrips Football Podcast. It's time for another team season preview, and this time it's a turn of Aston Villa. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, whether you're listening on podcast, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcast, you know we've done a few podcasts by now on season previews. So we're getting the groove going. Hopefully, some other leagues like Serie A, which Ryan is organising at the moment, will be done as well. So if you're listening to this on podcast or watching on YouTube and you're interested in Serie A, that is coming as well. But today, we've got a newcomer to the podcast, Aston Villa fan, Eduardo Tansley. First of all, Eduardo, how are you?
I'm well, thanks, Andy. Good to be here on the podcast and talk a bit of football. How are you?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. I went to a festival on the weekend in Spain, so I got back yesterday. So obviously this will be released end of July, so it's been a few weeks since that ended. But time of recording, yeah, I've been in the UK about a day now. Got back about 1 p.m. Well, into Gatwick at 1 p.m. So yesterday was a bit of a write-off, to be honest. Got back about 8 p.m., which is a bit of a ball late journey home. But no, thankfully now all good to go for this episode and our next one, which will be Man City. So yeah, looking forward to doing that one as well. Well, not really, but yeah, you know what I mean. But yeah, no, very good, very sunburnt as well. There's also some good acts. So yeah, it was very fun, and that actually should be hopefully, provided everything goes to plan, another vlog coming out at some point in the summer about my time at Benicassim Festival. But Eduardo, you're newcomer to the podcast. We ask all our newcomers on this sort of mini series we're doing why they became a fan. And for you, now I couldn't find for your Twitter and I couldn't find through your WhatsApp picture where you're from in the UK. So for you, Eduardo, first of all, where are you based? Where am I speaking to you right now?
Sure. So I grew up in Lincoln, obviously of Lincolnshire, and we do have a footballing side there that plays its football in League One. I think one of the most infamous moments from experiencing Lincoln City football would be when they made a FA Cup quarter-final run. I think beating Burnley along the
Mm.
way, Brighton as well, but unfortunately not good enough on the day for Arsenal, who they lost to in the quarterfinals. But essentially, I've come to support Aston Villa. The story of how I supported Aston Villa is a long one, to be fair, because initially, when starting to get into football, I was a big fan of Barcelona. You know, the Messi, Xavi, Iniesta days, and I was sort of getting a bit of pressure at school that I needed to support a Premier League side. And so, I was reading my match of the day magazines, trying to choose, which side to support. And funnily enough, me and my mum had just flown back from holiday to Birmingham Airport. So my mum knew I was into football at the time. She knew I was a big Barcelona fan, and she was nice enough to think to take me to Villa Park whilst we were in the area. She knew it was a Premier League side. There's not really Premier League sides local to me in Lincoln. Obviously Nottingham Forest aren't too far, but bar that, Aston Villa are probably one of the next closest. And she was often telling me, don't support the London clubs. They're too far to get away. They're too inconvenient to get to, this and that. And so yeah, she took me to Villa Park, and we were lucky enough to meet a really nice steward who let us in the ground and let us around the changing rooms free of charge, and just a quiet day at Villa Park. Obviously, don't want to get that steward in trouble or anything, but it was very nice of him. And I left the day with an Ashley Young top that my mum had bought me as well. So that's when I started following Aston Villa from that day.
And you mentioned Young. Now, to the favourite players as a fan, was he one that maybe will stand out for you? Maybe he's a favourite player since being a fan, or is there maybe another player that has become sort of a guy you've over the years loved and more than anyone else?
Yeah, I think Ashley Young has been an incredible servant to club. Even looking back at last season, what he was able to do at his age was really remarkable. Even somewhat benching Matty Cash on some game weeks due to the defensive shift he was able to put in. And I think many fans were sad to see him not renewed, and obviously now gone over to Everton. But in terms of favourite player, I've got quite an unusual one. It was a player from our championship days, and we've had many powerful strikers throughout the years. I've been following Villa, Ben Teke, Tammy Abraham, to name a couple. But my favourite is actually Jonathan Kodjia, who made close to 100 appearances for Villa. Unfortunately, was sort of thrive through, did struggle with injury at some points, broke his ankle at one point actually, for the club. However, my first game to see Aston Villa was a loud day at Villa Park. I think October 2016. We're at home to Fulham, and the first Aston Villa goal I've seen live was incredible acrobatic finish by Jonathan Kodjia to make it 1-0 Villa, and that's how the game ended. So it all stems from there, really.
Okay, so I can sort of see how the link was there, first goal and first game, stuff like that you saw and stuff like that. So I can see why that would be, a player that you look back on with fond memories. And speaking of which, actually, that is a nice segue into my next question. Before we go on to the off season at the moment, is favourite memory as a Villa fan since you became a fan of the team?
Yeah, actually, I think my favourite memory, and a lot of other Villa fans would have been happy on this day, was our 7-2 victory over Liverpool at Villa Park, coming in 2020. I think it was somewhat dimmed by Spurs happening to beat Man United 6-1 on the same day. But I think the achievement of Aston Villa to obviously beat the reigning champion 7-2, Ollie Watkins scoring his first ever Premier League goals in that game, a hat-trick in the first half. It was just great viewing. Unfortunately, it did happen to coincide with the time that I caught COVID myself. So I maybe wasn't able to get as excited as I would have liked, but it was an incredible day to be a Villa fan for sure.
I should have really been expecting that to happen. Me as a Liverpool fan, when I knew I was doing an Aston Villa podcast, favourite memories, especially seeing yourself as quite a young man, so you weren't obviously a fan who was of the the European Cup days and all that and stuff like that, or the European adventures, even in the early noughties, when you had that great team. So yeah, I should have probably expected that to come, but it is a shame, but still seeing that loss, always seeing that gold badge on our shirt always makes you feel a little bit, makes it sort of numbs the pain a little bit. The fact that I can still, because that's something I wanted for years. So that is, yeah, that was obviously, I couldn't be, that was obviously, I remember a few hours before, Man U lost was a 6-1 to Tottenham. And I think was that at Old Trafford as well. And, I was, because my brother's a Man U fan as well. So it's a case where, I'm not one to really give him stick, and I was preparing to give him stick, but I thought, wait till the game's over and done with the Liverpool game in case we lose. And then that's what happened. And it was quite astonishing. And it's a good thing I wasn't in school those days, because I reckon if I'd gone to school the next day, I'd have been given so much stick. I mean, even back, when I was in school, I had some stick for like Liverpool back then when you're going for the title, we'd lose to, I don't know, some team like or draw 0-0. Like a lot of times the 08 or 09 season was the best example of that. The fact that Monday morning, if your team lost or you dropped points and you're going for the title, it was a case where you get stick. But I imagine with that'd have been, oh my God, that'd have been, it's a good thing I wasn't with anyone apart from my family and I was unemployed at the time. So I don't have to worry about colleagues or schoolmates giving me stick. So that was, but fair play to Villa. That's great performance, great result. And we were awful that day. Right. So going on to the current summer for Aston Villa, of course, a season where you finished I believe it was seventh last season. There was enough to finish in Europa Conference League, back to European football for the first time in years. You have got a playoff round coming in the Conference League. But in terms of ends, one actually happened very recently. I believe whilst I was away, I was actually near the area of Villarreal for this festival. Pau Torres arrived for £31.5 million from Villarreal. Other players come in. Some of the small name players like Cole Brannigan and Callum Morland. Rico Richards on a free as well, but the one that obviously is one other free transfer that really has been one of the more underrated, I think, signings at the moment is Yuri Tillmans. And then transfers out, no real, obviously you mentioned Ashley Young, but no real other major outgoings. Obviously players such as, players like fringe players or youngsters such as Declan Firth, Hayden Linley, players I've not even heard of. Other players like Ashley Young, obviously mentioned Brad Young is one as well, but and then the youngster Kane Kessler Hayden has been loaned out, I should say, to Plymouth till the end of the season. So overall, not really many ins or outs really. Villa. Quite a summer really, apart from those two major signings. So as a whole, how would you rate the summer business from Aston Villa?
Yeah, I think obviously an important consideration also is the appointment of Monchi as the football president at Villa. I think that, as well as the business we've done in terms of players, signals a statement of intent from the club to bring in Monchi, who obviously recently has faced allegations of physical altercations with Sevilla player Isco, but nevertheless did create a winning culture at Sevilla and also was partnered with Emery at times there as well. So I think bringing him in was a big coup for Villa, and I'm excited to see what them two together can achieve in terms of the transfer window going forwards. Um, and in terms of Pau Torres, I think that it's a great defensive reinforcement that maybe is more of a Unai Emery centre back compared to our current defenders, that with his ability to progress the ball in terms of both carrying it and playing it forward. And also Tielemans as well provides crucial depth if we are to hopefully pass the European play-ins. We need that depth in the squad. You know, we saw West Ham have a fall off in the league table last year from competing in the Conference League, and we don't want our league position to suffer as much as that. So bringing in as much depth as possible will be important. And obviously, you look as well at our links very recently to Diaby and failing Diaby, you know, Doku. And I think these are two wingers that are right up there in, you know, in the European leagues and the talent they've got. So I think the fact we're linked with targets like that, it's really promising times for the club.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And of course, it's your first European campaign, I believe, since 2009, I want to say. And from what everything you told me, it sounds like you were a bit too young for the last time you were in Europe. So for you, even though the tournament's only been 2 or 3 years old, how exciting is it for you to see your team be playing in Europe next season, provided you get through the playing round?
Yeah, I think that it's, you know, everything that we sort of would have wished for, seeing our club that has had European glory before down in the Championship. You know, it doesn't feel right. It kind of feels like we were sort of destined to get back to that European status. So being able to see it happen, being able to have another opportunity to win a trophy, another opportunity to watch, you know, Aston Villa during your week, I think it's really exciting. And I think that Emery, you know, being the manager and the pedigree he has in Europe, really does want to take Aston Villa further and really will compete in these European competitions as well.
Yeah, I mean, Emery's track record is, especially the Europa League, is out of this world. I mean, it's multiple Europa League wins and even took Arsenal to a final as well, even though his time there is seen a lot by a lot of people as a underwhelming period, not just Arsenal, but also his career. So yeah, I think having him in charge and the job he's done as well to get you from obviously a guy I love, Steven Gerrard, replacing him, and they were 16th at the time, and they've gone on to finish in a seventh position, European position. It's quite the achievement, and Emery, I think, deserves a lot of credit for that. But in terms of, you've made Europe now, great season last year to make it on I think as a final day, you made it to the Conference League. Just how does the team kick on? Because it's a league at the moment where Newcastle have just bought Tonali for 50 odd million. Arsenal spent money on Declan Rice, City are City, Liverpool making moves. Man U are signing a Nana by the looks of it, maybe Holland as well. So obviously, Champions League is a very hard thing to get into, but also, you never know, Kane might go, but he might get some players into a place and that do just as well. So in terms of Villa performing this season, obviously you could argue that maybe the European fixtures might have been hindered because of multiple games, but West Ham have proved that that's not the case always. So for you, just how does the team kick on? Is it a case of kicking on where you just keep around the same position, or is there maybe expectation from the fan base to try and go for each Champions League spots, or is it just having another good season? What sort of is the expectation this year of Villa, and how sort of do you think the team could possibly kick on, and what is viewed as progress for Aston Villa this season?
Yeah, sure. It's a really good question. I think that, firstly, I think what's promising is if, you look at our squad, there's plenty of players that are still young and with room to grow. If you think about Douglas Luiz, if you think about Ezri Konsa, if you think about Leon Bailey, if he stays, Matty Cash, they're all 25 years of age, and that means there is room for them to grow, as well as Cameron Archer and Jacob Ramsey, two players that were part of England under 21's Euro success this summer. So if you consider that, that is, that is encouraging to think we've got the youth there in a sense that is able to improve from season to season. Obviously, that might not be, upgrading from Douglas Luiz to someone, to a player someone may consider world class, but just that gradual improvement from season to season is crucial to improvement in the Premier League generally. And then also, I think, we haven't had a manager like Emery in some time. So for him to secure Europe in his first season, bear in mind it wasn't even a full season. I think the roof for Aston Villa is, optimistically high at the moment, because we've seen the run he was able to put together at the end of last season, and it excited fans. The big sort of names that are coming in, we haven't seen the likes of Pau Torres linked with Aston Villa in, a long time. He's a Spanish international. So, I do think it's exciting in terms of that, but also we can't get carried away with ourselves, looking at fellow underdogs Newcastle. They managed to embrace the top four in, their first attempt of asking. I don't think the top four necessarily is a realistic aim due to the reasons you stated, but there's no reason why we shouldn't long term think that if we keep recruiting players of this caliber, and if we keep developing young talent such as Cameron Archer and Jacob Ramsey, why a trajectory could be towards there. But people think the traditional big six, it's always hard to beat them out, but obviously we were able to beat out two of the traditional big six last season. Tottenham, whether Kane goes or stays, they're probably due a big rebuild shortly. Chelsea will probably be in somewhat of a rebuild mode this season due to their, wacky transfers of late. So I think you've really just got to capitalise when other teams aren't on the ball. And as Newcastle did particularly well last season, as Brighton even did. And I think that's crucial to climbing up the table. You even look at Brighton, and of course we rate their recruitment. We know what they can do in the transfer market in terms of finding gems, but you do have to acknowledge, compared to Aston Villa, we haven't lost a player such as, McAllister, Caicedo, how crucial them players were to their team last season. We haven't lost a Watkins or something like that. We are, this summer so far, able to retain our better players from last season. So I think that's important as well, not to be a selling club. Maybe as Brighton, they're getting a huge profit for their players, and, you've got to respect that completely. But if we're able to keep hold of our best players, then that's even more promising as well moving forward.
I agree completely. And I think that your best signing probably has been the last year, getting Emery in. And I think that you're having him in, and I think that you haven't really lost anyone. Obviously, Ashley Young, you could argue maybe off the pitch as well, could be a big miss. I think he probably brings a lot of leadership and experience to the dressing room. But I think, you've a lot of links with the likes of Ollie Watkins was linked heavily with a lot of teams over the last 12 to 18 months, and other players like that. I think so. Keeping all them, and I think getting Thielman in on a free is fantastic, because it's risk free. First of all you got to do is wages, and that's it. And I think that he's proved that. Obviously, everyone knows he's got a goal in him, like a good goal in him, and he's had probably one bad year in the last 5 years. And I think I believe he's still fairly young. I actually don't know what his age is, but he's I think it's absolutely brilliant. And I think that goes to show, which is really a segue into my next question, is that this team is really keeping out likes of Coutinho, who has struggled a lot this season. I'll get your take on him now, because he came in on loan last January from Barcelona, had a great loan spell, 6 months, in all competitions, well, just Premier League it was at the time, that last season, 19 games, 5 assists, and then in this season just gone, all competitions, 22 games, just 1 goal scored. When you bought him for, I believe it was like 17 to 18 million pounds, everyone saw that, like myself, as one of the biggest steals of the transfer window, to get him so cheap, considering he was port of over 100 million pounds from Barcelona. He had a great loan spell, only to go for £18 million. Everyone saw as incredible business, but proved to be this year not the case. I mean, it's clearly he's not Emery's guy. He's had a few injuries, but what do you think happens to Coutinho? Because everyone knows the talent's there. He scored against Arsenal last year, and that was his only goal of the season. But everyone knows he's got the talent, and obviously it's well documented how bad his time was at Barcelona. But what do you see happening to him? Do you see it being a case where he leaves in the next 6 to 12 months, maybe to Saudi, play with Gerrard, or do you see him at any point in the season making some sort of resurgence in the Villa team?
Yeah, I think a player of Coutinho's stature, in no way am I have the illusion that he's not good enough for Aston Villa Football Club. I think that ability-wise, I'm sure that he's one of the better players we have been able to sign in the January transfer window. And when he first came in, I was absolutely ecstatic to see a player of his caliber come into our club. And I think, although Steven Gerrard's management was, simply put, pretty poor, one thing that does go in his favour is he had the big name to attract players to the club. And I think bringing in the likes of Coutinho and Kamara at the time, Gerrard really was able to improve the status of Aston Villa, which I think was a stepping stone towards Emery. And so, although his management in game was poor, I think his pull was important for us at the time and has, benefited us long term. In terms of Coutinho and his performances, obviously on his debut, came in, scored against Man United. It felt like we'd pulled off some sort of wizardry in the window at that moment. But what's particularly disappointing, I think, is that a lot of players look poor under Gerrard. You think of McGinn, he was getting, a lot of unfair criticism during that time. And then when Emery came in, McGinn, Mings, Buendia, even Watkins went on a really hot run of form. And you saw a lot of players improve in the team. And unfortunately, not even Coutinho was able to get in on this hot run of form that a lot of our players caught following Emery coming in to manage the team. So I think that's what was particularly disappointing. I think, if Gerrard's Saudi club was to come in for Coutinho and we were able to recoup some cash, I think a lot of Aston Villa fans would snap your hand off for some, cash for Coutinho right now, because I just don't think that, we've seen it really working. Even, the likes of Buendia can have inconsistent games. Sometimes we might call for other players to come off the bench, but not a lot of people, I would say, are calling for Coutinho to be in the team. And, it's a real shame because we know the talent he possesses, and it was really exciting to see a player of his big name come into the squad.
Yeah, I think you look at Gerald's poor, someone like Diego Carlos as well, who I know hasn't played much because of injuries, but of course he's a guy that had a lot of people like Newcastle after their takeover were linked with him a lot, and the fact to get him, and I know he's not played, but that shows again the pool Gerald has, and I think that in a way, I think you can look at it in a way. I think that's what you're saying about the fact that whilst Emery's has proven that Gerald was either not up to the job or maybe he wasn't ready for that kind of job just yet. But he sort of has in a way led to bigger things. Obviously, getting the likes of these players in, and then that sort of helped Emery come in and help these talented players progress even further. So I think there's a little bit maybe you could thank Gerald for, but I don't really, even though I love the guy, I don't think you can thank him too much because you were teasing on relegation form, and Emery's basically just made these players look 10 times better. As these players, all these signings some years ago, you spent all this money on players, almost got relegated that season, and these players were seen as players that can make you challenge for being potential European places, and obviously that never happened. So the players, everyone knew the players were there, but I think Emery's just finally helped them realize their potential. Now into our final segment, which will be as to do with every fan who comes on this series, asking each fan where they think their team will end up in the Premier League table this season. So you are currently our fourth guest on the podcast doing these previews. So we'll obviously rank you among everyone else, see who's the most optimistic and least optimistic. So Eduardo, where will Aston Villa finish in the table this season?
Okay, yeah, so it's a big question, and I'm going to say that Aston Villa, fingers crossed, can hold down the 7th position.
Hey, so that means, obviously, we are doing City next. We know where that's going to go, their prediction. But at the moment, you are the second most optimistic fan. So at the moment, you are second behind Keg, our Newcastle fan from Magpie TV. He had him finishing fifth. And Oliver Lee, our Bournemouth fan, had him in 14th. Bournemouth, sorry. And then Jay Martin, our Forest fan, had him finishing 13th. So yeah, that's I think that's a good season. I think I mentioned progress before. I think if you can stay in the place again, despite having more games, it shows your squad adapted to the kind of rigorous fixture list. And I think that'll be a good sign going forward. And a bonus question for you. If you make it past the playing round, how far do you see Villa going in the Conference League?
Yeah, I think obviously encouraging was Juventus obviously took a 1-year ban in European competition, and they were going to be competing in the Europa Conference League. They would have been both a tough opponent to come across, but also it meant that we've moved into a seeded position in the tournament. So we should, in theory, get a lower ranked opposition for the playing game. And I think that moving forward, if we can keep our players fit and keep good squad rotation available for these games, and with Emery's European pedigree, I can see us going, as far, if West Ham can do it, I can see us going as far as, the late stages, the semi-final, the final, no doubt.
Well, that would be quite the season if you did that. That would be a great season. So that is where we're going to end the episode. But before we go, of course, Eduardo, you are a fellow writer for Vavel. So people who are maybe watching on YouTube or listening on podcasts who haven't been aware of your work, how can they find you on social media?
Yeah, sure. So my Twitter handle is at Ed Tansley Sport, Tansley Tansley. There I share a lot of the Vavel articles I write, or if not, feel free to look up my articles in the Vavel website where you'll see my various writings on Aston Villa.
Fantastic. So yeah, we will obviously put this tweets out on Instagram post about this episode when it comes out, most likely late July. And obviously you can then find his work on there and you can give him a follow. But in the meantime, this has been the Eurotrips podcast. I've been your host, Andy. This has been Eduardo, and we will see you guys for our next team season preview. See you then.